Hi everyone, I'm Dean and this is Aisha, and it was my turn to say hi, so
Yes.
I was told to say hi. So welcome, I hope everybody's doing well. So this is one of our regular talks. We're hoping to meet on a regular basis, usually on Mondays, but it could change depending on the situation.
That's right.
And also, not all of the videos will be live streamed. We'll actually have some organized recorded material with PowerPoints and visuals as well.
Yeah.
So today we wanted to talk about nutrition and brain health. To us, it's extremely important. The concept of brain health is a concept that's not taken seriously because people believe they don't have any influence on the outcome on this complex disease at multiple levels.
That's right.
We think that this incredible tool is too complex to affect, to influence, for one. And second of all, we think that there's nothing that can influence it that's within our control, be it something as simple as nutrition, are you serious? Or physical activity, or some of the other activities throughout life. But it is extremely important that we actually take that into consideration. We call medicine the most important, food, the most important medicine for the body and especially the brain. In a previous session, we actually talked about the fact that medicine that we have today is nominal at what it does. It's important, it's valuable where it needs to be used, especially when somebody's in an acute situation such as heart failure and emergent blood pressure and cholesterol and so on and so forth. We must be very compliant, because if you're not, you can have strokes, you can have heart attacks. But in a chronic basis, we believe that the most important thing we have to influence the brain is food, because
well, we believe that food is one of the most important environmental factors that one is exposed to. I mean, think about it. If for a normal person, when they're exposed to, say, smoke,
yeah,
living in Los Angeles, that's not a problem. You know, when you have environmental exposure to pollution or any harmful metal or any element for that matter, you're concerned that it would affect your body. Food is one of the most important exposures. It's something that you put in your body 3 to 4 times a day, sometimes more. And so essentially they're the building blocks of your body and especially of your brain, because the brain consumes about 25% of all the energy that is introduced into the body.
Correct.
So it certainly is very important.
And the idea that brain is a static organ, even in the scientific world, it's believed to be a static organ, because it is said that it is stuck in G0, or a specific phase in cellular reproduction where there is no reproduction. It's static and it doesn't change for heart, muscle, for brain. But that's not the case. Yes, for a lot of neurons that is the case. But for a tremendous system of supporting structures, as well as the neurons themselves and the connectivity, it's an ever dynamic process. It's an ever-changing system where the connections grow by the thousands every minute, where the covering of the connections, which are the dendritic arborization and the axons, are always changing. The fat content of the cells, remember that more than 90% of the brain is fat. I mean, from the cell walls to everything you can imagine, it's fat. And it has to be changed, and it has to be altered over time. The lipid content of the cells are altered throughout time, and where does that come from? From food, and the food we eat. So it is critical that we actually take that concept into our mindset, especially so at the two ends of aging. When a child is born, when there's a new baby,
Exactly.
and as they're growing, all the way to age 21, because the brain is incredibly adaptive, and it's adapting continuously.
Yes.
For the first few years of life, especially in the 9 months in the womb, and then the first few years, where it's growing faster than it ever would thereafter.
Exactly.
And then at the end.
Exactly. And not just the brain itself, but the supporting structures, you know, the vessels that supply those nutrition or the nutrients to the brain. Their health depends or is affected by nutrition as well. So let's say, you know, you have two beautiful cities, but the road between those two cities are completely damaged. There's not going to be any transfer of information between them. And arteries are just basically do that.
Correct.
You know, it takes oxygen and nutrition to the brain, and if those highways or those roads, the arteries, if they're not healthy, then there's going to be some deficit.
Correct. It's with that mindset that we want to actually spread this information as much as possible on a day-to-day basis when you're taking care of patients in the clinic, and you have to see them, you have to take the history, you have to do the exam, you have to, you know. There isn't a lot of time to give, you know, significant lifestyle advice. You do it in a cursory way, or you have pamphlets, and none of that has been shown to really connect. So, as physicians, I think it's all our job to, whenever possible, speak to the part of healthcare that has the greatest effect, prevention.
Exactly.
And promotion of health. So it's not just prevention, but promotion of health. We now know that the kind of activities that you undertake, the kind of inputs that you put into your brain throughout life can not only influence whether you're going to get certain diseases, but more importantly can help you expand cognitive capacity throughout life.
And create a cognitive reserve,
Yes.
which is, you know, a type of, how should I put it?
Bank
The analogy is like a bank account. You know, as you go on, you put some money in that bank account, so that when the day comes when you need all the resources, you will have some. And cognitive reserve is just that. You know, at a certain point in your life, you're trying to live a healthy lifestyle. You're trying to build those connections between the neurons and build a very healthy environment for the brain to grow and promote itself. And then when there's an insult to the brain, such as a small stroke or, you know, a head trauma, so on and so forth, that bank account is full. And so it will not manifest into a major injury or a major deficit in the brain. So it's really important to address this, you know, at every stage in life.
Exactly. I mean, it's so interesting to us that so many people come to us, captains of industry, very famous and important people, and then they focus on some minor little element or some part of their body that has, you know, not significant effect on their life. The organ of consciousness. The organ of consciousness. I love that concept. The human brain.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing we have, and we can influence it on a daily basis. The same is true for our kids. That organ is in our control. What we put into it, the foods we put into it, actually significantly influence not just acute, but long-term processes in the brain, including behavior.
Absolutely.
So with that said, we wanted to talk about a couple of the diseases. We will have many other sessions on this. This is our area of interest and research, which is lifestyle. And one of the areas, most important area, the centerpiece, is food. So I myself, we were not good at when it came to food. We were not very picky. I always tell people that my favorite food used to be, and it's not sophisticated, I know, Philly steak and cheese. And then my second favorite food was Cheetos. So be it. But it's a choice. I've made a choice. We are vegetarian and we've become vegan. That's not what we are actually preaching or pushing to anybody else. But we're saying that the choices have to be made, and it doesn't have to be binary, all or none. And Aisha will talk about her research, which hopefully will be published in JAMA soon, about the incremental influence of food. So it's not all or none. One step means one step towards health. 2 steps in change in life and nutrition means 2 steps towards health.
That's right.
So let's talk about a couple of diseases. We have dementia, we have depression, we have
Stroke.
Anxiety, ADHD, stroke.
Yeah.
Today we'll we'll see how much we can cover. But let's start with Alzheimer's and dementia.
Sure. So, diet is an area that was not very exciting for scientists and physicians because it's so complex. You don't eat one food or one vitamin or one micronutrient at a time. You eat so many things together.
Yeah.
So capturing that data is very, very difficult, and it depends on your memory and so on and so forth. But we have different tools of capturing data on nutrition, and a lot of dietary patterns have been studied to see its relationship with Alzheimer's disease specifically. Correct. And the one that has been touted the most and has been talked about the most, and some of you might actually have heard about it, is the Mediterranean diet. And Mediterranean diet, why Mediterranean? It's because back in the 1950s and 60s, some of the epidemiologists in the United States, they looked at the differences between morbidity and mortality between the Mediterranean area and the US, and people living in the Mediterranean areas tended to have very low risk for diseases of chronic
Correct.
Aging, like heart disease and strokes and dementias and cancers and so on and so forth. And they were curious to find out what it is. Among a lot of factors, we'll talk about that some other time, diet was the most prominent one. It was very different from what, the standard American actually ate. The standard American diet,
Yeah.
which is, SAD, the SAD diet, unfortunately. And the Mediterranean diet seemed to be very high in unprocessed whole foods, lots of fruits and vegetables, legumes, cereals, grains, very little sugar, almost non-existent, and the sugar came in the form of fruits, very low saturated fat sources, whether it was meat, dairy, dessert, and their source of fat was polyunsaturated fats, which came from plants and olive oil. And so we were fortunate to work with certain databases here, and one of the works that we did was to look at the dietary pattern specifically for stroke, but they've actually tested it for Alzheimer's disease as well, and they found that people who adhere to a Mediterranean-ish diet, even in the United States, tend to have lower risk of Alzheimer's disease. Yeah. And they had better quality of life, they had long survival. And that was a very important finding. And one of the most interesting and I would say hopeful finding was that it's not an all or none phenomenon. It's not either you eat it and you do bad, yeah. or either you eat it and you do well, or you don't eat it and that's it for you. It wasn't like this. We scientists have created an adherence score, which means, from 0 to 6, 0 being very bad and 6 being really good, or 0 to 9, where do you fall? And we found that even a small change in your diet can actually make a difference, and it can lower the risk for Alzheimer's disease for individuals who are at risk. And that's incredible news, because what does that mean? It means, even if you make small changes, say eat an apple, or add a salad to your regular daily diet, that makes a big difference. That can significantly reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease.
That's also very important, because often I believe, and we've said this often, that physicians actually fail people when it comes to their health care. You have 20 minutes to see a patient. At the door, hi, doing the exam, doing the history, some cursory reflexes here, listening to the heart there. At the end, at the door, say, you have to eat healthy. Mm-hmm. And that's it. A very blunt, monosyllabic. And so the patient is left, what does that mean? Or even if they spend a little more time, you have to eat a vegetarian or Mediterranean or a diabetic or a cardiac diet, something of that nature. What does that mean? You have to reduce your fat. What does that mean? So one of the things that we want to emphasize is behavior change, and behavior change happens in increments. It works by working around people's strengths. So be it reducing and eventually eliminating sugars, reducing salts, reducing saturated fats, increasing vegetables, increasing nuts, increasing legumes and beans and things of that nature. One of those, you can pick one of those. You can make a list, but pick one of those. Make that your success story. One of the best management or motivational books I read was Progress Principle. Behaviors become habits. Habits become personalities when they're built around one behavior at a time, keystone behaviors, which are then used as a foundation for further behaviors, and that's how a whole culture and a family is created. But it has to start small increments. That's why your work, which I'm proud to say was recently awarded the Alzheimer's Greater LA Innovation Award, as well as the American Heart Association Award, and hopefully will be published in JAMA, speaks to this incremental approach to change in diet and behavior. And that's why it's important that we actually promote that concept.
Yeah.
So that's stroke. And the percentage of reduction was?
For stroke, the percentage of reduction, risk reduction for all strokes was 18%. And similar numbers were seen for ischemic stroke, and there was a trend towards reduced risk for hemorrhagic stroke as well. And that's incredible news. So and that's adjusted for age and for all the other confounders. Whether you exercise, whether you're for women, whether they're on hormones, whether they have other diseases like high blood pressure, diabetes. So it's incredible news. And same thing for depression. A lot of scientists have looked at similar dietary patterns, whether it was Mediterranean diet or a diet that was high in plant foods. And it seems that, the risk of depression is quite low when a unprocessed whole foods diet is consumed.
Yeah. Now, the important thing about this diet and stroke risk is, so there are about 700,000 strokes per year, right?
Yes.
Now, that actually is just tip of the iceberg. Strokes speak to the end stage disease, when the disease is so bad that the person has had a big vessel closed. But there are many vascular phenomena prior to stroke, the microvascular disease. The microvascular disease is almost universal, and this is in millions of people. In fact, microvascular disease is even seen in Alzheimer's, and we think that it's one of the elements that actually promote and push towards Alzheimer's. So we're not talking about just stroke. We're talking about vascular disease.
Exactly.
That's in the millions, and that's actually those conditions are actually influenced to a much greater extent by nutrition and diet.
Absolutely.
So that's why it's significant that in your 30s, 40s, especially 40s and 50s, the midlife, they keep talking about midlife as a risk factor for stroke, for dementia, everything.
Exactly.
It's important to change diet.
Exactly.
Start slowly, but incrementally increase it.
And what you highlighted right now is so important because, as doctors and scientists, we get information about the importance of all these risk factors, whether it's diet and physical activity, but implementing that in the patient population or in the community, or implementing that in our families, my mom or your mom or our aunts and uncles, we have to understand and get a good sense of what the limitations and the strengths are for the patient or for the individual, who's going to bring these changes, and work with them incrementally. Otherwise, there's so many diet gimmicks out there. People get lost all the time, whether it's paleo diet or this diet or that diet.
Grain and this. In fact, that's one of the biggest problems we have in the Google age. They say, Google, I searched to Google and I found X, Y, and Z, and I tell them, I challenge you to put any two relationships, and you'll find somebody speaks to that. For example, if you say, consuming aluminum and reduction of cancer, somebody somewhere has said they saw that kind of relationship. Just because we see that a few papers or even some anecdotes, well, plenty of anecdotes, it doesn't mean, and this confusion, which is sometimes promoted by some companies and others, can actually significantly harm the relationship between physician and science and patients, because in that confusion and a sea of chaos, the patient just gives up.
Yeah, then that's why people don't really trust the healthcare system, because of all that confusion.
Correct. The grain brain or paleo diet. I mean, it is based on no science, absolutely, but nonetheless, they have enough momentum and enough sound bites and noise out there that they confuse what has been shown to be effective. A plant-based, low saturated fat, low sugar, low salt, legumes, nuts, grains. That's it. That's what it is, and that's the kind of thing that nobody can make money off of. It's a lifestyle, and it's a fantastic lifestyle that doesn't only affect stroke and dementia and depression and ADHD, but your entire health in general.
Exactly.
So we will get into more detail in the future as far as
it's a great topic.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of information about diet, and we will, cut it into small episodes and talk about each dietary pattern at different times.
Let me ask you. Remember so one thing that's very interesting is Mediterranean diet and hippocampal volume. You want to tell them about that?
So
the hippocampus, where it is, and
so the hippocampus, or the hippocampi, plural, are two areas in the brain about the size of my thumb, like so, which are responsible for memory, processing memories, and creating memories. Short-term memories. And, that's one of the areas that neurologists and neuroscientists study the most, because it gets affected very easily. It has very vulnerable blood vessels, and it's, one of the areas that shrinks the most when people have memory problems. And,
or even with just normal aging.
Correct, exactly. And in New York, and from Columbia University, a number of scientists actually looked at hippocampal volume, so the size of the hippocampi, in people who ate a certain type of diet, Mediterranean diet, versus the standard American SAD diet. And we have some objective evidence that when people ate a Mediterranean diet, which was high in unprocessed whole food plant-based diet, tended to have bigger hippocampi, healthier brains compared to those who ate a standard diet. And I think that's just
and that was
wonderful.
For a short period of time.
Exactly. That was I forget the number, but I think it was between 2 to 5 years that they studied these individuals. But even in a short span of time, they could actually tell that diet actually makes an objective difference in the brain, where you can see the structures thriving and
growing,
being healthy compared to others.
Ultimately, I mean, it makes sense. Something that goes into your body 3 times, 4 times a day. We talk about exposures, we talk about environment. You said this, I know that, but I want to kind of emphasize it.
Yeah, we put so much sunscreen when we go outside, because we're concerned.
And in LA, we see people with face masks because of pollution and so on.
Or they sell air in cans now.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous.
Exactly. So. But when it comes to something that goes into your body and makes your body is continuously reconstructed by the food that you eat. Mm-hmm. How could it not affect it?
Absolutely.
Having said that, I think we want to end this, and we'll hopefully see you next time.
Absolutely. So tune in, check our Facebook page, Team Shares Eye, every once in a while. We will actually put, an indication of when we're going to talk. It's mostly going to be on Mondays, and we will put the topic. And again, feel free to post any questions. We would be happy to get back to you. Our goal is to, disperse as much information about brain health and neuroscience as much as possible. We always love getting feedback from you, so please tell us how we can make this better. And it's always wonderful to be here and connect with you.
And spread the news. Our only mission is to give the latest data. It's not. This is our job. It's science. So data-driven, well-founded science, well-powered, and not anecdotal. We want to get the latest information, summarize it, and provide it in a, pardon the pun, palatable way to you guys. So please spread this feed to as many people as you can. We will talk about brain health and everything that influences it, not just at the in the elderly, but in children and throughout life, because it's the same. It's the same thing, but it affects in different ways. I would love to talk about ADHD and food and children. Talk about IQ and intellect and food.
Absolutely.
The relationship that they found. So
absolutely, and we will summarize some of the latest papers on dietary patterns. That are published in peer-reviewed journals, so you wouldn't have to read them. And shout out to a lot of our resident friends who are actually tuning in from their residency right now, working at the hospital. You guys are the best.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.